We got it.
Hello and welcome to the Michael Mamas Show. I am your host, Michael Mamas, and we're coming to you from Mount Soma, home of the Sri Someshwara Temple in the mountains of western North Carolina. And I got a thing popping up on my screen here that I don't know how to get rid of. Do you know how to get rid of that, Scotty? Can you see it on your screen?
Yeah, let me see.
It's a thing from StreamYard.
Yeah, I'll see what I can do here.
Well, I'll start. And if you can get rid of that thing, it'd be good. Okay. So this is actually a very interesting time, a critical time, I'd say. And the current events are all over the place, with Elon Musk and bringing out all of this stuff about, Hunter Biden and also a lot of the stuff with the COVID virus and what's his name now, Scotty? Dr.
Fauci?
Yeah, Fauci. And now he's going to be going up in front of Congress, and evidently there is a lot of research out now saying that all the things he was saying about the vaccine and transmission of the virus and all that was all wrong, which incidentally is something I've been saying from the very beginning. And it was really just common sense. If you just took a quick look at the nature of that vaccine, it wasn't a vaccine really even. Anyway, the point of this podcast, and not just today, but really in general terms, is to sort of take a step back and take a look at the bigger picture instead of getting, all caught up in the details about, Fauci or the border, and those are all important things, hugely important things. The drugs pouring into this country, on and on and on. The energy crisis that's hitting Europe and the United States and globally. And but all those need to be viewed in a greater context that I guess the press touches upon at time to time. But it's really what needs to be emphasized. And also, it needs to be more deeply understood, the mechanics of the whole thing. That's why we've talked in the past about cleaning the fishbowl of consciousness. The world is like a fishbowl, and the global consciousness has to stay clear, but it's gotten so clouded through all the identity with different perspectives and all the little things that are huge in the context of daily life, but small in context in relation to the greater whole. And people have gotten so tied up in knots, and perspectives that have so dominated thinking that the whole thing just needs to unravel. It needs to get cleared out. And that's, again, what Mount Soma is about. How do we cleanse the global consciousness? You see, it's not about, is this perspective right or is that perspective right? Not really. What it's really about is awakening global consciousness and having global consciousness function in harmony with nature. That one thing that's the source of all things, the source of all the harmony in the whole universe. But even the problem with saying that is based on a person's perspective. They'll say, oh yeah, well, this is what nature is based on my perspective. But they don't say based on my perspective. They say this is just the truth. And so their idea of living in harmony with nature is by pushing their truth. And we do talk about perspectives, and I certainly have my perspectives, but still the bigger picture isn't about the perspective. It's about nature, and it's about clearing global consciousness so that human beings, societies, people function in harmony with nature, not because of how they define it, but what it really turns out to be. Didn't Abraham Lincoln, Scotty, what did he say? Somebody said we're going to win the Civil War because God's on our side, and Lincoln responded by saying, "I'm more concerned about not if God's on our side, but whether or not we're on God's side." And kind of that sort of idea, you know. So some interesting things are happening here that I think will be historically profoundly relevant. You know, we talk about the Industrial Revolution. We talk about the computer revolution. Now we're going to be talking about, I think, the internet revolution. Because if you really take a step back and look at what's going on with the internet, it's really fascinating because we're all being bombarded with all these different perspectives. And the question then becomes, what is humanity's relationship? What is the individual's relationship with all these different perspectives? You know, it was a lot easier pre-internet days, even pre-television days, to bamboozle the masses. And the masses became accustomed to, you know, relying on the news, relying on what they read in the newspapers or whatever about what the political leaders are saying, and that's how they find their truth, and they go with it. But through all the different, you know, cable television and all that, and now the internet and all these different perspectives, it's all over the place. And so the internet revolution in its early stages, which we're still in, but I think we're coming out of, we're going to come out of, had no idea. I mean, if you say that, oh yeah, I get it, you know, but really the way people function, they have no idea how to deal with it. Are they being discerning, or are they just being gullible and going along with the group consciousness that they happen to have a little affinity for, their little clique, their social orientation, religious orientation, what have you? And so this whole thing with Elon Musk, I think in that context is really interesting, because what comes out of that? What is revealed or isn't revealed? It is really putting right in the face of humanity the understanding that, you know, humanity is being duped. Humanity has been duped. And even very mature people haven't really cultivated a healthy relationship with that. They listen to the different perspectives, find the one that they resonate with for whatever reason, and that becomes their truth. And then that becomes very polarizing against other people, because how can they say that can't be true? MSNBC has to be right, or Fox News has to be right, or, you know, the president of Ukraine has to be right, or George Soros has to be right, or the CCP has to be right, you know, and we're getting past that. So we're going to be moving out of the gullibility arena, which really wars have been fought in the name of. Why did we have a Vietnam War? Why did we invade Iraq? What was going on with World War II? How far did a society have to be pushed before that they were convinced enough to go to war with neighboring countries? And that's, you know, World War II, it's World War I, it's the Russian Revolution, it's history. Attila the Hun, how did he get his guys to invade all these other people? It's all just a control of the mentality. And it was a lot easier to do pre-internet revolution. Because now, okay, at first, I remember when at first, if there was anybody who got anything negative written about them in the internet, oh, it was horrible. and they call them trolls, people that would get online and say something slanderous about a person, and just ridiculous. But nevertheless, in the more naive time of the internet, people would read that and believe it, and you could destroy people with it. You could destroy companies with it. That's changing. And we're just at the beginning stages of the degree of that transition. And what are we talking about here? We're talking about discernment. What Adi Shankar has said is the path of spiritual evolution, the path of discernment. And so we're going to be becoming discerning, and we're going to get past that kind of mentality that the internet just took by the horns and wrestled to the ground just effortlessly. It's interesting that Apple, we have these demonstrations going on in China, and the people, particularly the young people, are rebelling against the Communist Party, the CCP. And for a long time, you had, a lot of the woke companies, Apple, Coca-Cola, I believe, Nike, NBA basketball, they were pretty much complicit. They were not saying anything because they were making money off of China. And what happened then, and you may have seen this on the news, was Cook, the head of Apple, was at the White House, and he was going to meet with Congressman, what's his name? Anyway, he was walking down the white hallway there to go to the meeting, and some newscaster was trying to talk to him. He was avoiding her, had people standing between him so that she couldn't get to him. But nevertheless, she was calling out questions. How do you feel about, I think she said, slave labor being used in China to produce products that you're selling and that Amazon is selling and that is dominating the global markets and the markets in the United States? How do you feel about that? No comment. He just remained silent. Oh gosh, she just fired out a bunch of questions about how Apple Computer was complicit, getting everything manufactured in that country, and she was great, really, the questions she asked, and he never said a word. But I just saw in the news this morning, I think that happened yesterday or the day before, but what I saw in the news just this morning in multiple sources, that Apple Computer now is going to be moving its manufacturing facilities out of China. Did you hear that, Scotty?
No, I didn't. That's huge.
Isn't that huge? And other companies have been going, they're going to, I understand they're going to be going predominantly to India and Vietnam. But see, so let's tie that into this bigger picture I'm talking about. There's too much coming out of the internet. There's too much knowledge. Even those kids, those young people in China that are demonstrating in the streets, you can't hide anymore. The internet is there. The information is there. People are getting a taste of freedom. They're getting a glimpse of freedom. They're realizing there's a better way. And they're seeing not their world dominated by communist China, CCP, and that's how life is. But now it's just become a small part of a bigger puzzle called global consciousness. And so the internet is serving to really facilitate that transformation into a world that isn't run by the autocrats who control the mentalities from the top, but are controlled by the people, because the people have insights. They know. And that inner knowing touches the depth of their soul. And that's what I talked about in a previous podcast. Starts coming from the grassroots. Government of the people, by the people, and for the people. Instead of, by, and for the autocrats, of, by, and for the money and the power. It's a great time in human transition, and it so coincides with what we've talked about the transition from the age of ignorance to the age of enlightenment, to the golden age. And I've talked about all the different places where there are indicators of that. Numerology, astrology, if you're into that stuff, right in the Vedic literature, the ancient Vedic literature, it says this is the time of that transition to a very positive world. You see? But now there are two poles. Like I've said in the past, the world's always going to have two poles to spin around. But right now, the dominant poles are the autocrats, the one world government, which, if it was an enlightened leader at the top, it'd be great, but it's not. It's autocrats. It's people. I mean, gosh, I looked at a video of, what's that guy's name? Klaus Schwab. Did you see that video? He was dressed up. I swear to God, he looked like Darth Vader. His outfit and everything. If you put the Darth Vader helmet on him, it would work in a movie. You saw that, huh, Scotty?
Yeah, but I keep wondering, is that just, are they doing that on purpose? You know, because it's got to be, you know, that
You
can't
would
be
think
just
so,
like,
but they're
yeah.
not. That was real. Yeah. You know, and so there's that whole thing going on, and they're just going to run the world into the ground because it's not. Why is that guaranteed that won't work? Because it's so contrary to Mother Nature. Maybe a autocrat here or there got away with it in some third world country, or even one of the big countries, you know, for a period of time. But it collapses of its own weight. It's too far out of harmony with nature. And to try to pull that off globally, where George Soros and Klaus Schwab run the world and all the government leaders, you know, kowtow to them, it's not going to happen.
In the past,
the transition will take place. I need better earphones. These things keep falling out.
Michael, in the past, you've talked about how, you know, like the unified field keeps pulsing purity through relativity, you know, and that's how it's gotten everything to where it is now. And it's gonna do the same thing with all this too, right? It's keeping
here's
pushing
the thing.
it through, and
Let's do an analogy with that. Mentality, mind, is built out of two things: prana, and what is prana? Life's breath. The life force in its pure state, the unified field, Chaitanya, Bhavatitam, you know, that lively quality emerging in infinite harmony, kind of like we get a sense of it on a beautiful summer morning in the valley in nature, untouched, and just, you know, the mist is there. It's just so pure, so vibrant with lively health, you know, and that's prana, life force. And the prana our breath that comes through our breath, it's breath on all the different levels, you see. So I forget the word you used, Scotty, but it's just like the absolute breathes, and that value wells up. But prana then interacts with karma. Prana, perfection, at the basis of all existence, wells up and interacts with the karma of the time to create mind, mentality. So the prana is beautiful. It's divine, if you will. But the karma can be what it is. And so when we talk about cleaning the fishbowl of consciousness, we're talking about healing the negative karma. There's a good karma too, but we're talking about healing the bad karma, purifying the karma, so that the awareness of individuals functions in harmony with prana. And then the karma that gets created from that is evolutionary. It's life-supporting. It's in harmony with nature. But it's important to realize a lot of times people think of karma in terms of something outside of themselves. Oh, the karma is going to get me. No. Most of your karma is between your ears and in your heart. It's your mentality. And that's true on an individual level. It's true on a global level. I think that was responsive, huh, Scotty?
Yeah. It's just there's coherence that's going to be push, things are gonna clear out. It's like,
Correct.
you know,
That's exactly right. Yeah. So because now there's this concept of the lowest common denominator. Everything gravitates towards the lowest common denominator. Uh, that things that all people, no matter how highly evolved or how lowly evolved, if we can say it that way, how in harmony or how out of harmony with nature they function. There's what is there anything that can be common to all of them that they would relate to in their current state? See, deeper level divinity is common to everybody, but if people aren't able to really perceive those subtle depths, and if they're caught up on the surface, then the lowest common denominator becomes something more guttural. And Scotty, it's interesting. I've heard that the most visited, the most used part of the internet is pornography. Had you heard that?
yeah, that's like, I think been since like the establishment of the internet,
Yeah,
even.
that's the common denominator. And if you look at the world, you can say in any field of life, you can ask yourself, what is the lowest common denominator? You can look at it politically, materially, musically, spiritually. There was a guy I knew I lived in Athens, Greece for a little while. And there was a guy there. I even remember his name, even though it was years, decades ago. His name was Evgenia, his name in Greece. But he was born in I think, as I recall, a small village in Central Africa. Like, uh, and But he came out of the village and he ended up in Greece. He was a really neat guy, and he spoke multiple languages. He spoke English, he spoke Greek, he spoke his native tongue. I think he spoke French, and he was really into linguistics. And this is, I think, interesting because everything maps, and those parts of the human anatomy that make sound. We say the depth of the throat to the up into the nasal turbinates and all. That maps, you could say, onto the chakra system, lower chakras, upper chakras, crown chakra, for those of you that are familiar with that, or just heaven and earth, or higher and lower, heaven and hell, if you want to go there. But at any rate, and that's kind of tangential what I just said, but at any rate, he was saying that he noticed that the further south you go, like in the Central Africa, I can't do it, but the way they speak comes from kind of down here. It's kind of more guttural and like that. And then as you move up to Northern Africa or Southern Europe, it gets a little higher in the throat. And then up all the way up into like Germany and probably Nova Scotia, and that it's more of a sinus or upper resonant center. And there's an analogy there. I just thought that was an interesting thing when I heard it, so I'm sharing it. And we don't want to take that analogy too far, and then I could get into trouble if people go off on that tangent. So please don't. But the idea is that the internet is like that too. And what's going to happen, you see, because people are seen as lowest common denominator. And not just pornography, but the trolls, people attacking other people for God knows what reason. And just because they have stuff, they have issues, and they hear things and they spread it, and it just and then it cascades, But the thing is, with the internet, that's becoming more and more obvious. People are starting to get it. And as they do, what's going to happen is the whole mentality, global mentality, is going to rise up, because it's like holding up a mirror to humanity and saying, look what you people are doing. Look what you people are oriented around. Look how you're thinking. Look what you've been duped into believing. And all that's going to purify out. And we are in that process now. This thing with Elon Musk, if he's right or wrong, like him or not like him, that's certainly a step in that direction. And Apple Computer moving out of manufacturing out of China. That's an indication that on a very major scale, a corporate scale, major corporate scale, biggest company in the world, I think, uh, is being affected by that shift in mentality. They can't get away with it anymore, you know. And as that happens, more and more things are going to take place in a positive direction. So we're in that transition period right now. You see, uh, now these next couple of months, for many reasons, it's going to be pivotal. First of all, we had the elections, and now there's going to be a whole new. It'll be interesting to see who though I think it's already decided. It'll be interesting to see who the Republicans put in as Speaker of the House to replace Nancy Pelosi. The election that's coming up, I think, next week in Georgia, that will have a lot to do with the balance of power, if you will, in Congress. That'll be an interesting outcome. Uh, the weather is getting colder and colder in Ukraine, and there's people are living there. It's so horrible, without heat in the cold. It's getting cold in Ukraine. Without heat, without electricity, food scarce, and then concurrent with that, I understand that Russia's ammunitions are running lower and lower. It's coming to a head. Also, it's becoming more and more revealed that what's his name, Zelensky, has been getting rich off of the war, as has Soros. And what do they call that? Oh boy, here's an abbreviation for it, but it's the cap of private sector that it's actually running the country over the government. It's really that private group that has control. And that's what's on the news. I don't know how true those things are, but you're hearing it enough. I think it is true, and they're even saying all over the place that, the U.S. government doesn't even know where all the money's going that they're giving. It's not all going to weapons, evidently. And then there's this whole thing about the world government that we talked about, and also the what is it? The G8, right, Scotty?
Oh, G20 or the
Yeah,
G?
G20 in
Yeah.
Indonesia, and how they're just in bed with each other, and then there's this thing unbelievable with BlackRock. BlackRock is a company that manages funds, people's investments, and they at one point they were managing $8 trillion. Think of the power. $8 trillion of cash money that people were investing, and they were handling the investments. And then they got into this whole thing called what's the abbreviation? ESG funds. And ESG funds were funds that, different funds are rated different ways, and funds got better ratings based on the board of directors, how it was structured, how many minority groups were on the board of directors. And also they got better points for how many women were running the company or on the board of directors or what have you. And different woke policies like that they were adhering to, as opposed to whether or not they were making the investors money. And what turned out is that the investors were bailing out. That's not why they were investing their money. If they want to fund a company to be more woke, that's their business. But when they invest money, there should be a return on investment. And in the past, if a corporation didn't focus on the return of investment for the investors, they could get in big trouble for that. It was a fiduciary violation, And so at any rate, it's blowing up in their face because, total investments went down from $8 to $6 trillion. So I think things are shifting. I think people are waking up. I was looking at our New Year's predictions, Scotty, for 2022. They were right on. I mean,
Yeah.
if if I do say so myself, we did great. And so now we're coming up to where we're going to be making the 2023 predictions. But it's going to be really interesting because December and January things are going to shift with, I think, the border, major things, the drugs pouring into the country, energy, uh, uh, what else? So many things. Uh, Ukraine, and so how fast that transition takes place, or where the chips end up falling over the next 2 months is going to be critical. And we don't really know for sure yet. There's this guy, Peter Schiff. He's a famous economist. He's written books, but he has a pretty negative perspective on where the world is headed. He's talking about currency crisis, unemployment spiking, uh, huge recession, huge inflation, uh, falling value of the US dollar, energy prices surging, petroleum reserve dwindling even further. We'll see. I'm not so sure. That's definitely the way things are headed. But there's this grassroots welling up, as demonstrated by Amazon moving out of China, things like that. Or I mean, Apple. It's yet to be seen. And so we'll make our predictions, Scotty, for 2023 here in another month or so. I wish we had 2 months because we'd know better. But let's wait and see. But boy, we were right on last time around. I was pretty surprised, really, that we did so well. Now, here's another thing. There are a lot of demonic waves in the world. And I think Hollywood convinced us that the demonic waves, they wear black and have black hats, and the good guys wear white hats and, silver bullets. That's not true. I mean, we all know that's not true, but somehow I think in life we kind of think that way, because the point is, it's important to realize that even the demonic waves, they don't consider themselves to be demonic. That's Hollywood. The demonic waves consider themselves to be justified. They consider themselves to be right, even righteous. And so that's why, and that relates back to the internet. That's why taking a step back and looking at the internet, which we're all doing, because it's a click a button away, is another perspective. We will start as a species to become more discerning. Everybody wants the same thing, when I say everybody, the mass of the population, people. We want a good home. We want a happy family. We want food on the table and a warm bed to sleep in at night. We all want the same thing. But we get so manipulated with these even crazy narratives. And at first, the internet was used to propagate even the sickest narratives. But I think people are getting sick of that. They're seeing it. So the great recoil is coming. The great transition is coming. A listener sent in some things. I posted it in the blog that's associated with this podcast. Different things that, people are saying is going on in the world. You can look at it if you want. I think we're pretty much all, if you're paying attention to the news, and I think even a little discerning, you start to see it, that all that is going on. But at any rate, let me see if there's anything else here I wanted to talk about in my notes. The whole thing about free speech. Really, we addressed it, didn't we? because
Yeah.
that's what the internet is about. Different perspectives are coming out, and so a relationship with them is what's going to make all the difference. All right, I guess that's it for this week. I hope you enjoyed the
Um,
podcast. Scotty, go
Mike,
ahead.
there's a comment that I don't know if you see it up there.
What is it? Go ahead and read it.
Um, I know people that would consider you demonic and say that you don't know that you are. My question is, how does one reliably evaluate this so-called demonic wave?
Yeah, that's an excellent question, and I don't know. I guess I failed. I thought I made the point is that everybody from their perspective, they don't consider themselves demonic, and so where's the truth found? And the point is that the truth is not found in the narrative that you've been indoctrinated into, the narrative that you've been convinced into thinking. The truth is found in the depth of your own being. And so the challenge isn't in finding the right narrative so much as it's going beyond the possession of narratives into what they call the soul, your heart. Not and see now your karma is not just in between your ears; it's also in your heart. And so we have to look deep within our heart. It's not just our emotional heart, which can be swayed by perspectives and is, but it goes even deeper. And truth does dwell within the depth of every individual. That's a place inside where you already know. But the challenge then is in finding that. And neither I nor anyone else can do that for you. You have to find it for yourself. And that's why I say that even though, yeah, I do have my perspectives, I do have my worldview and all that, but the bigger point here is not to push a perspective, but to help. I'd like help humanity, help us all move beyond perspective and find that place inside that is that place of wisdom, that place of inner knowing, and make your decisions from that place. And again, wisdom isn't necessarily the deepest place you're able to function from. It's the deepest place that dwells deep within us all once the clouds of karma are cleared. You've already got it. That's not the question. The question is how we free ourselves from the indoctrinations that have been imposed upon us. Echoes of truth hold truth at bay. We find real truth deeper. The echoes are spun by the winds of karma, you see? Is that responsive, Scotty? I think so.
Yeah, and I think for people that don't understand, what we've been talking about too, it's important to know kind of like from the absolute to the relative, as it comes up out of the absolute into like that feeling level, then it goes up into the emotions and the thoughts,
Mm,
and then into relativity.
mm.
Those thoughts and emotions are tools for us to use to navigate to try to get down to those feelings. We don't,
It's a good point.
right?
We think our way through life, but really we don't. How we feel about all the different thoughts determines what we believe and which thoughts we align with as truth.
Yeah.
But if our feelings, see, there's fine feelings and there's grosser, cruder feelings, and there's finest feelings. The more refined our physiology becomes, the physiology of our psyche, I'm talking about, then the more we start to function from a place of more and more refined feelings. And the more refined our feelings become, the more in harmony with that divinity within wells up through all the different levels of our life and into the very thoughts that we have, you see?
Right. And I think it's also important for people to understand it's not like you're trying to get them to a new identity or a new preconceived notion or a new association or a new connotation. It's it's learn
Oh, I just lost you, Scotty. Scotty's audio just went, but his point I get, and it's valid. I don't know what kind of government we're going to have in a golden age. I don't know. Nobody knows. It's not for us to know. As we clean up the mentalities and clean up the global dynamic, then governments more and more in harmony with nature, laws, rules will emerge. They're more and more in harmony with nature. And that's what it's about. It's facilitating that process without trying to impose our perspective upon it. I think we're getting another comment here. I don't know.
Another question. It says, follow up, can someone have a feeling inside them that they believe is true and yet be mistaken? Because if that's the case, then I don't see how looking inside or whatever can be reliable.
It's an excellent question, and that's why I say there are superficial feelings, and then there are deeper feelings, and really what that's about. Then, yeah, you can feel anything. I mean, let's face it. Some people feel strongly one way, other people feel strongly another way. But refining the physiology, refining the awareness, cultivating the depth of our being, it's a process. You know, I guess if I could do an analogy, it's like, building a muscular body. You don't say, oh, okay, I want a muscular body, so boom, now I'm having a muscular body. No, it's a process of cultivation and conditioning and development over time. And like that, we need to develop and cultivate and refine our psyche. And again, classically from the ancient seers throughout time, really, proper meditation has been the main key for that. And also what we're doing at Mount Soma is we're building, Mount Soma is designed in accord with the information there in the Veda of how to build a society, how to build a enlightened city, which radiates coherence and harmony to the world. It's not about having a city that pushes a perspective. No. I mean, you could say that that's a perspective too. Well, if that's the case, it's a perspectiveless perspective. It's a perspective that wants to free us from all the chains of all perspectives so that we can rest into our own inner knowing, our own inner divinity. And so there are different levels of feelings as well, you see. And you can feel passionate about something. It doesn't mean that on a deeper level, there's a deeper feeling that we have even a hard time accessing if the physiology isn't refined enough. And it's not my job to try to tell you what your perspective will be when you're more refined. That's wrong. That's historically what's done oftentimes, isn't it? But it's wrong. At the same time, like 10 commandments. Okay, good. You got a world of masses out there and people are killing each other. Thou shalt not kill, And so there are 10 commandments there, and they're training wheels though. And they're good and they're valuable, but they're training wheels, And what has to happen is that we find that inner wisdom within ourselves. Not because somebody's laying a rap on us, and if we just dance to that tune, then we're a better person. The Shastras are loaded in the Vedic literature of 10 commandment type things, if you will. And they're good. They're tools. They're tools. But if we're not careful, you take even the most refined and laudable tools and turn them into a fanaticism, a Sharia law, all of its own type. If I don't mean to offend the Sharia law, I don't even know anything about it really. But in other words,
a bad relationship with that Sharia law.
It becomes a bad, unhealthy. And I'm not saying Sharia law is. I shouldn't even brought that up because I don't know.
A bad relationship with Christianity or a bad relationship with anything. Right?
You can have a bad relationship with Christianity. You can have a bad relationship with Sharia law. You can have a bad relationship with anything. That's right. So what we're talking about is cultivating a healthy healthier relationship. And the only way you do that is from within. As you become healthier within in the depth of your being, your relationship with all things becomes healthier.
And Michael, I think one of the things that's helped me kind of work in this is that understanding myself and my own identities and how rigidly do I adhere to things that I think I know, and then working with that to how does that shape how I interact with everything else out there? Am I able to pick up and put down the realities or identities or patterns or whatever and pick up the one that best is most life supporting
That's
for every
right.
in the moment.
Yeah, that's right. But and the thing is too, we're talking about not the fringes of the bell curve, not
Yeah.
the extremes. I mean, yeah, trust me, serial killers are bad. Okay, uh, uh, those are extreme, and we're not that stuff becomes, I think, intuitively self-evident to essentially all of humanity. But we're talking about the more subtle nuances,
Yeah.
So it's not like we have no discernment. Everybody has some degree of discernment, but we're talking about refining it and cultivating it to a point where we all live in harmony with nature. And when we do that, that will dictate what the laws are of nature at the time, what the healthy perspectives are, like that. All right. I guess that's it, Scotty. I think we made the points. And anything else, Scotty, before we close?
No, I think.
All right. Thanks, everybody, for listening. Thank you, Scotty. You cleared up some points there that were important to clear up. I appreciate it. Okay. Take care, everybody. Next week.